Every generation believes, deep in its bones, that it is free, that it stands taller, walks bolder, and chooses its own destiny in a way previous generations could not. But every generation eventually discovers a quieter, darker truth. They were not born into freedom. They were born inside someone else's balance sheet. From the moment we take our first breath, we're taught that freedom means choice, the freedom to study, to work, to spend, to dream big dreams and chase big futures. But in this modern economy, built on invisible numbers and silent obligations, choice has a credit limit. And freedom comes with interest. You don't own your house. You sign the papers, celebrate with the keys, and take pictures in front of a door that feels like yours. But the deed belongs to the bank until decades of payments say otherwise. You don't own your education. The knowledge is yours, yes, but the paper that certified it was financed by someone else, a lender who will follow your footsteps for years, claiming pieces of your paycheck long after the classes are forgotten. And most haunting of all, you don't even own your time. Because somewhere, quietly, relentlessly, without pause or mercy, the debt clock ticks forward. Each second is another reminder that borrowed futures eventually come due. This isn't a conspiracy. There are no shadowy figures in the dark, no villains twisting mustaches behind closed doors. It is a system, a structure, a quiet empire forged not by kings or emperors, but by contracts, loans, and the miracle land, the curse of compound interest. This empire has no flag, no anthem to memorize, no borders to cross or walls to climb. It doesn't need armies, soldiers, or conquests. It conquers through signatures, through agreements, through promises made with one stroke of a pen and repaid through decades of labor. And yet, despite its invisibility, this empire governs nearly every decision you make. Where you live, how you work, who you marry, what you dare to pursue, what you quietly abandon. This is the empire of debt, the only empire in human history that never sleeps, never bleeds, and never stops expanding. You cannot overthrow it with revolution. You cannot vote it out, protest it, or march against it, because it does not rule with force, it rules with obligation. Stay with us until the end. Because once you see how deep this system runs, once you understand the architecture hidden beneath everyday life, you'll finally understand why history keeps repeating the same collapse, the same silent unraveling, the same quiet fall of civilizations that believed their prosperity was real when in truth, it was borrowed. The story doesn't begin with soldiers, kingdoms, or revolutions. It begins with something far more powerful, a signature. In the 20th century, the world discovered a revelation. Money didn't need to come from printing presses. It could come from promises. When a bank gives you a loan, it doesn't hand over someone else's savings. It creates new money with a few keystrokes. Your debt becomes the system's profit. And just like that, the modern financial empire was born. Not through conquest, but through contracts. After World War II, the world stood on the edge of a new beginning, but also on the brink of collapse. Entire nations lay in ruins. Cities that once echoed with life had been reduced to ash and twisted steel. Factories stood silent, their machines frozen. Railways were severed. Power grids were shattered. Millions of families were displaced, grieving or struggling simply to survive the next winter. The world didn't just need hope. It needed capital, massive, immediate, unprecedented capital. Money to rebuild roads, industries, and armies. Money to relocate survivors and restart economies. Money to turn rubble back into civilization. And as governments searched for the fuel to restart the engine of the world, the banks were already waiting. They arrived not with armies or tanks, but with paperwork. With contracts, with promises that the future could be borrowed piece by piece, signature by signature. Mortgages, car loans, student debt, credit cards. Each one was presented as a solution, a lifeline, a tool of modern prosperity. Each one was a new mechanism to reach forward into tomorrow and pull the wealth of the future into the hands of the present. Mortgages rebuilt the suburbs' rows of houses rising where battlefields once stood. Car loans put an engine in every driveway, with highways stretching like arteries across reborn nations. Student loans filled universities, training a new generation to run the world that was being rebuilt beneath their feet. And credit cards' small, rectangular promises put purchasing power in millions of pockets, turning someday into right now. And for a time, the world prospered. Factories roared back to life. Consumption boomed with a force never before seen in history. Families bought homes furnished with new appliances from new stores in new shopping malls. Corporations swelled into global giants. Governments measured success by growth, and growth was measured by spending, and spending was fueled by debt. Debt became the oxygen of prosperity, essential everywhere. The world breathed it in with confidence, building bigger, buying more, expanding faster. But like oxygen, too much becomes poison. What began as the fuel of recovery slowly became the foundation of dependency. A system that couldn't function without borrowing more than it earned. A world addicted to tomorrow's money, unable to stop pulling from a future that was never prepared to pay the bill. The 1980s marked the true dawn of the new empire. Money stopped being about what you earned and started being about what you could borrow. Leaders like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher promised economic freedom, deregulation, and growth. What they delivered was leverage. Banks were unleashed. Credit became limitless. And corporations discovered a new weapon: financial engineering. Why innovate when you can borrow? Why build when you can buy back your own shares? Why grow through effort when you can grow through debt? The system began rewarding short-term gains and punishing patience. It was the financialization of everything, the moment when money stopped representing work and started multiplying itself. By the 1990s, debt had become invisible, woven into every part of modern life. Governments learned they could run deficits without pain. Corporations learned they could load balance sheets with borrowed billions and still call it growth. And people learned to measure success by how much they could borrow. Student loans replaced opportunity. Mortgages replaced ownership. Credit scores replaced character. The empire didn't conquer you. It seduced you. It made you believe that endless credit was freedom. But real freedom ends where interest begins. Then came the early 2000s, the age of derivatives. Debt wasn't just borrowed anymore. It was packaged, sliced, sold, and resold again. Mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps. Wall Street turned debt into a commodity, a casino built on IOUs. And for a while, everyone was winning. Until 2008. 2008 was supposed to be the end. A global financial heart attack. But instead of destroying the empire, strengthened it. Governments bailed out the gamblers. Central banks printed oceans of money, and citizens were told to tighten their belts. Losses were socialized. Profits remained private. That was the moment the empire of debt stopped pretending to serve you and started feeding on you. After 2008, economists called it the era of low interest. But truly, it was the era of no consequences. Debt was free. Money was infinite. And the empire expanded faster than ever. Corporations borrowed trillions to buy back their own stocks. Governments borrowed to fund promises they could never keep. Consumers borrowed to survive on wages that never rose. Every paycheck, every purchase, every public policy became another link in the chain. The world felt comfortable, but comfort in this system is a warning. The more comfortable it becomes, the more fragile it actually is. Then came 2020, the perfect storm. A global pandemic, frozen supply chains, economies brought to their knees. Governments printed more money in a few months than they had in the previous century. Combined stimulus, relief, support. New names for the same old addiction: more debt. because the real crisis wasn't the virus. It was the mirror. When production stopped, the world suddenly realized how little of our economy was real. How much of it was simply numbers on screens dead pretending to be wealth. But the empire doesn't collapse, it evolves. Welcome to the next era. Digital debt. Central banks all over the world are building digital currencies, programmable money. Every single transaction will be traceable. Every credit limit adjustable. Every wallet controllable. On paper, it's sold as efficiency. In practice, it's about control. Because when money becomes code, debt becomes data. And whoever controls the data owns the empire. The dream of freedom through credit is morphing into a system of surveillance through currency. Your account can be frozen. Your access can be limited. Your wallet can be programmed for compliance. This isn't science fiction. It's official banking policy being developed right now. For all its complexity, the empire rests on one ancient still principle: trust. Trust that your salary will buy tomorrow what it buys today. Trust that your government won't print away your savings. Trust that someone, somewhere, will always be there to buy the next $1 trillion of debt. But trust is fragile. In 2022, inflation surged. People felt their money evaporating in real time. The empire's magic trick became visible and terrifying. And governments. They blamed everything except the truth. The system survives by devaluing you. Inflation is not an accident. It's a tax that requires no vote, no debate, no consent. And when inflation becomes unbearable, the solution is always the same: more debt. The empire now stands at a crossroads. 3 paths, none of them painless. Path 1, a controlled collapse. A slow, steady erosion of purchasing power. The middle class dissolves into the new working poor. The rich remain untouched. Path 2, digital control. Central bank digital currencies become reality. New rules, new restrictions. Zero privacy. Path 3, a revolt through reality. A massive shift toward tangible assets, decentralized systems, and stores of value that simply cannot be printed. Gold, crypto, commodities, energy, land, valuable skills. These are different paths, but they all lead to one destination: a fundamental reset of power. Because when debt grows too big to pay, empires don't go bankrupt. They change the rules of the game. Throughout history, every major financial collapse has triggered a massive transfer of power from those who trust the system to those who question it. We are entering that moment again. This isn't just a crash, it's a transfer. From paper wealth to real wealth. From illusions to tangible assets. From borrowers to builders. We were taught that debt is normal, the price we pay for progress. But debt doesn't build civilizations. Discipline does. Production does. Trust does. When a society stops producing and starts borrowing, its future has already been sold. Every empire in history falls for the same reason, not because it runs out of strength, but because it runs out of trust. The empire of debt is no different. People will still have numbers in their bank accounts, but they'll stop believing those numbers are real. And yet, within this collapse lies a rare and powerful thing: clarity. When the illusion burns away, what remains is truth, and truth is always the foundation of the next empire. History doesn't end with collapse. It resets. It clears the ledger. And every single time it does, those who understand how money really works rise higher than ever before. The empire of debt was never truly about governments or banks or currencies. It was about belief. And that belief, right now's breaking. So as the world approaches the next great reset, remember this: the people who inherit the future won't be the ones with the most credit, but the ones with the most clarity. The empire is cracking. The only question left is, will you be paying the interest? Or writing the new rules? Because the answers you seek aren't hidden in the future. They're written in the past. Thanks for watching.